We have to stop treating adding more volume as a solution to every training problem. Hey, everybody. I thought I would chat with you guys and yell a little bit about this today. And when I make this statement, I am not saying that there are not cases where increasing volume is a valuable tool. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is volume itself beyond a certain threshold doesn't really show even any data or the real world to necessarily add large amounts of additional muscle growth. And I want to be clear, even the various conflicting studies on it, even the ones that show higher volumes, beyond the first few sets per week, right? Because those usually are very robust. Like doing only one set a week, it doesn't produce necessarily very robust muscle growth. Okay, and in some cases it may not for non-novice lifters. But when we start getting into multiple sets, that obviously, like doing 3 sets a week in every study produces more muscle growth than 1 set. 5 sets a week almost always produces more muscle growth than 1 to 3 sets. And this has been seen for decades in any research that we have. This is generally accepted. And it's very measurable differences, even when we have less sophisticated equipment than we do today. But beyond a certain threshold, it really is subject to debate. It's different schools of thought and different researchers are not getting the same conclusions. But what we need to be clear on, they don't show massive differences. In other words, we don't ever have someone doing 10 sets a week in studies who doesn't grow and then going to 15 or 20 magically causes them to start growing in the other groups, right? We don't see that in research, and we don't see it in the real world. We do not see that in the real world. So, these topics come up, and it might be a very, very small difference, sometimes statistically insignificant or barely large enough to measure, maybe even inside the margins of error, okay? But it's never, hey, we gained 30% more muscle. That doesn't happen from doing that. That doesn't happen in the research anywhere. And some studies show the opposite, that it sometimes causes less muscle growth, depending upon which lab did it. So when people bring this up, they're like, well, I'm trying to optimize. I want an insurance policy. And it's like, if you want an insurance policy, then simply train harder. Simply rest harder. That's your insurance policy. And again, there are cases where I increase volume considerably for lifters with a specific weak link. Okay, there's sometimes a glaring weak link that we will do more volumes for. But it seems like whenever, like even someone will watch my own training, they'll see my training logs because they're put up with dates. You guys can see what I do in a week. It's not just these little voiced over informative videos. All my training is documented. All of it. And all my workouts are put up by date. You can see what I do. People will bring up something even for me, and they'll be like, but don't you think maybe having a second bicep day, could it possibly have some more benefits? And, my answer is usually maybe. Maybe in some cases it could. But at what cost? Okay? Because that's the problem we run into. Every time we start thinking of volume as a solution, you have a muscle that's lagging a little bit. Our solution should be, well, just train it more. Because if that was the case, then there wouldn't be world level bodybuilders and powerlifters and athletes who use fairly low volumes and frequencies. There wouldn't be people winning the top levels at the world level if that was the case. And yet we've always seen it. We've seen both high and low frequency and volumes of training produce results in the highest echelons of all of these disciplines. Okay, whether it's drug tested or otherwise. Right, we've seen that repeatedly. So it's obviously not the only way. But the problem is when it becomes our solution, that's then our solution to everything. Okay, if automatically, well, we just need to do more total sets, more frequency, add an extra day for this muscle. Well, then that becomes our solution for everything. And when we get into that mindset, I'll just throw more work at it. until we get overuse issues or until we run into issues of where we're spending all of our free time training. And I think people have to factor that stuff in. The quality of life, the time. And the other issue, when we push that, then it starts telling people who have tighter schedules. There's people who can only get to the gym 2 or 3 hours a week. And before long, then those people are like, well, if that's all I can get to the gym, then what's the point? If they have all this person over here, I work out 3 hours, 5 days a week, Like you're spending 15 hours a gym lifting, 15 hours a week lifting. There's no reason to think that's optimal. But that's what happens when we get into that volume mindset, and before long, that's when people are like, oh, I can't do that. So they don't try, because that's what everyone's telling them then they have to do for results. You got some of the best bodybuilders in the world have been like, I work out for 45 minutes. I cut my workouts off at 45 minutes. Okay? Even if they're doing 4 days, 5 days, 6 days a week, sometimes you still see that. Did it stop them from winning a Mr. Olympia? No. Stop them from bench pressing 500 pounds? No. So this is the problem. We get into this that it becomes our solution. And we're not thinking of the psychological impact, the time impact, the overuse issues. Maybe sometimes is if you're doing enough work. Again, I get it. If you have something that is truly lagging and maybe it's the one muscle that needs some extra work, there might be a case for that in many cases. But it shouldn't be your automatic default assumption. Maybe it should be, is the work I'm doing high enough quality? Instead of, am I doing enough? Because if you're doing 10 sets for a muscle a week, I promise you it's enough. Again, keep in mind, anything beyond that is going to be a very, 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 very small difference if it has any benefit. Very small. Is your work quality good enough? If you're doing 10 sets and you're not growing, maybe it's time to ask what's your set quality look like. How hard are you training on those sets? What's your range of motion look like? Are you working the muscles through the correct range of motion? Are you getting it into those stretch positions? Are we using decent form? Are we really training as hard on those sets as we think we are? Are you really pushing them close to failure? Okay. Are you hitting failure? The other thing then to think about, well, how do we know it's not a recovery issue? That's the other stuff we look at. Okay, most of the time it's probably what you're doing. What you're doing for that training may actually suck. You might have low quality sets in general. Maybe you're not recovering, right? Especially when you just keep adding volume and it's not working. Maybe you're overusing the muscle. Maybe they're not recovering session to session. Maybe you're not getting enough sleep. Maybe you're not getting enough food. Okay, these are other factors to think about. Our solution shouldn't always be, add 10 more sets. I had an extra day, right? All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.